Her life was a fairy tale written in the ink of his billion-dollar fortune. A penthouse overlooking Central Park, a wardrobe filled with haute couture, and a baby on the way with the man she adored. But one stray email, a confirmation for a romantic getaway to St. Bart's, with a name that wasn't hers, shattered the illusion. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's the story of the ultimate betrayal, a takedown orchestrated with a single, devastating phone call from an airport terminal. It's about how a woman pushed to the edge crossed an ocean, not to escape, but to build an empire of her own. Amelia Redmond believed her life was perfect, meticulously curated, like the modern art that adorned the walls of her Fifth Avenue penthouse. At 29, she was the graceful, intelligent wife of Jonathan Davenport, the charismatic founder of Davenport Capital, a private equity firm that devoured and restructured companies with surgical precision. Theirs was a New York City romance for the modern age, a whirlwind courtship, a lavish wedding featured in Vogue, and now the final perfect piece, a baby, their son due in 5 months. The city glittered below their floor-to-ceiling windows, a constant humming reminder of Jonathan's success. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of custom-tailored suits, marathon conference calls, and last-minute flights to London or Hong Kong. Amelia had once been a promising junior architect at a competitive firm, but she'd happily traded her blueprints for baby books, her hard hat for the soft responsibilities of a society wife. She managed their homes, planned their charity galas, and provided a serene, beautiful sanctuary for her husband to return to after his corporate battles. She loved him deeply and without reservation. She saw his ambition not as ruthlessness, but as drive. His frequent absences not as neglect, but as the price of their extraordinary life. This particular Tuesday began like any other. Jonathan had left before dawn for a critical off-site meeting in Boston. He'd kissed her forehead, his lips cool, his scent of expensive cologne and ambition already lingering in the air. "I'll be back late tomorrow, Angel," he'd murmured against her hair. "Take it easy. Think about names." Amelia spent the morning in the nursery, a room painted in a soft, ethereal grey. She ran her hand over the polished wood of the crib, a gentle smile playing on her lips as she felt the familiar flutter of life inside her. It was a kick stronger this time. "Hello in there, little one," she whispered. "Daddy will be home soon." In the afternoon, she decided to get a head start on planning their annual baby moon. Jonathan had promised her a week anywhere in the world before the baby arrived. She imagined the Amalfi Coast, the two of them disconnected from the world, his hand resting on her swollen belly. She opened his personal laptop, which he'd uncharacteristically left on his marble-topped desk. They shared everything he'd always said. Passwords were a mere formality. She was searching for flight availabilities to Italy when a new email popped into his inbox. The sender was the Chevalier Hotel Concierge. The subject line read, "Confirmation Presidential Suite, St. Bart's." Curiosity piqued Amelia, clicked it open. Perhaps he was surprising her. Her heart gave a little skip of excitement. The email was brief and professional. "Dear Mr. Davenport, this email confirms your reservation for the presidential suite from August 15th to August 22nd. We have noted your request for a chilled bottle of Dom Perignon Rosé upon arrival, and have scheduled the private yacht excursion for the 17th. We have also received the supplemental itinerary from your associate. We look forward to welcoming you and Ms. Dubois. Sincerely, Jean-Pierre, Head Concierge, the Chevalier Hotel St. Bart's." Amelia read the last line again. "And Miss Dubois." Her blood ran cold. Miss Dubois. Who was Ms. Dubois? It had to be a mistake. A business associate, perhaps. But a presidential suite. Dom Perignon Rosé. A private yacht. Her mind raced, trying to form a logical, innocent explanation. Maybe Miss Dubois was a client. A very, very important client. A cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She navigated to his sent folder, her fingers trembling slightly. She typed Dubois into the search bar. One result appeared. An email sent 2 weeks ago to an address she didn't recognize, stubois@viridianglobal.com. The subject was, "Our Trip." Her breath hitched. She clicked it open. Sophia. It's all booked. The Chevalier Presidential Suite. August 15th, 22. Cleared my entire schedule. This time, no interruptions. J. The screen blurred. The glittering city outside seemed to mock her, a cold, indifferent witness to the sudden collapse of her world. The baby kicked again, a sharp, insistent reminder of the life intertwined with this lie. There was no client. There was no mistake. Jonathan wasn't in Boston for an off-site meeting. He was planning a romantic getaway with another woman. This perfect life, this gilded pegu she had so happily inhabited, was built on a foundation of deceit. And the walls were closing in. The initial shock was a physical blow, leaving Amelia breathless and dizzy. She stumbled back from the desk, one hand protectively on her belly, the other pressed against her mouth to stifle a sob. The penthouse, once a symbol of her happiness, suddenly felt vast, cold, and alien. The art on the walls seemed to jeer at her, the silence amplifying the frantic beating of her heart. For an hour she paced the length of the living room, a storm of denial, rage, and profound sadness warring within her. It's a misunderstanding. There's an explanation. He would never do this to me. Not now. But the cold, hard text of the email was undeniable. Miss Dubois. Sophia Dubois. The name echoed in her mind. Who was she? The question became an obsession, a singular focus that cut through the fog of her pain. The naive, trusting wife began to recede, replaced by a woman with a chillingly clear objective. She needed the truth. All of it. Her background as an architect had trained her to be meticulous, to see the structural integrity or weakness in any design. Now she would apply that same analytical precision to the architecture of her husband's betrayal. She started with the email address Dubois, viridianglobal.com. A quick search for Viridian Global brought up the website of a rival private equity firm, a notoriously aggressive player in the market. She navigated to their Our Team page, and there she was, Sophia Dubois, Vice President of Acquisitions. The photo was a gut punch. Sophia was stunning in a sharp, intimidating way. She had sleek, dark hair, cut into a severe bob, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that was more of a smirk. She exuded a confidence that bordered on arrogance. She was the kind of woman who didn't just enter a boardroom, she conquered it. The bio listed her accomplishments: an MBA from Wharton, a series of high-profile hostile takeovers, a reputation for being a closer. She was Jonathan's female counterpart, his equal in ambition, and Amelia now realized his partner in deception. The professional mask fell away as Amelia dove deeper. A few more targeted searches led her to Sophia's Instagram profile. It was private, but the profile picture was a small, high-resolution circle. It showed Sophia on a sailboat, laughing, her head tilted back. The man beside her, his arm slung casually around her shoulder, was cut off by the frame. But Amelia didn't need to see his face. She recognized the watch on his wrist. A Patek Philippe Calatrava, the very one she had given Jonathan for their second anniversary. A wave of nausea washed over her. She gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles white. The baby moon he'd promised her. The yacht excursion in St. Bart's. It was all for her. The next few hours were a blur of digital archaeology. Armed with the knowledge that their lives were not private, Amelia logged into their shared credit card account. She'd always left the finances to him, trusting him implicitly. Now she scrolled through months of statements, her heart sinking with every line item. There were so many red flags, so many clues she had blissfully ignored. A charge from Le Jardin restaurant in Paris on a date he was supposed to be in Frankfurt for a banking conference. A hefty bill from the Gentry, an exclusive members-only club in Soho, on nights he claimed to be working late. And then the most damning of all, a charge from 6 weeks ago. Cartier, for thousands of dollars. An amount far too small for a watch, but just right for a piece of signature jewelry. He hadn't given her any jewelry. She remembered that week clearly. He'd been distant stressed about a deal he was trying to close with Viridian Global. He had mentioned a ruthless VP named Sophia Dubois, who was driving a hard bargain. He'd framed it as a professional battle. Now she saw it for what it was, a cover story. He wasn't just competing with Sophia, he was sleeping with her. The Cartier purchase was likely a gift to celebrate the closing of their deal. The final piece of the puzzle slotted into place when she accessed their phone records, a service she had set up years ago for tax purposes and had long forgotten about. She filtered for the number associated with Sophia's work email. The logs were a chronicle of their affair. Hundreds of calls and texts, late-night calls that lasted for hours, flurries of texts during the day. A call at 2 a.m. just last week, when he'd told Amelia he was on a conference call with his team in Asia. The lies were so audacious, so complete, that she almost felt a detached sense of admiration for their sheer gall. He had built a second life in the shadows of their marriage, and she had been its unwitting, happy caretaker. As dusk fell, casting long shadows across the opulent room, Amelia sat in the silence, the damning evidence glowing on the laptop screen before her. The pain was no longer a hot, frantic storm, but a cold, heavy certainty. The man she loved didn't exist. He was a phantom, a carefully constructed role played by a stranger. Her phone buzzed, a text from Jonathan. Just landed in Boston. Crazy day. Thinking of you and my little guy. Love you. The casual intimacy of the message, the blatant, effortless lie, was what finally broke her. The tears came, then hot and silent. They weren't tears of a heartbroken wife anymore. They were tears of rage. For her lost love, for her stolen future, for the child who would be born into this mess. As she cried, a new feeling began to crystallize in the pit of her stomach, hard and sharp as a diamond resolve. He would not get away with this. She would not let him come home and lie to her face, manipulate her with his charm, and beg for a forgiveness he didn't deserve. She would not be the victim in this story. She would be the reckoning. The next 24 hours were a masterclass in controlled fury. Amelia moved through the penthouse like a ghost, her every action deliberate and precise. The grief was still there, a raw, gaping wound in her chest, but it was now insulated by a thick layer of ice. She packed. Not everything, just the essentials. Her passport, personal documents, a few cherished items from her life before Jonathan, and the prenatal vitamins that sat on her nightstand. She methodically transferred half of the money from their joint checking account into her personal one, a safety net she'd barely touched since their wedding. She knew it wasn't much compared to his vast wealth, but it was a start. It was her escape fund. She called Chloe her best friend since college, a sharp-witted journalist who lived in Brooklyn and had always been slightly wary of Jonathan's polished perfection. "Mia, you okay? You sound strange." "I need a favor," Amelia said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "A big one. Can you book me a one-way ticket to Lisbon, Portugal for tonight? The latest flight possible." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Lisbon? What's going on? Is it Jonathan? Is the baby okay?" "The baby is fine," Amelia said, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. "Jonathan is not. I'll explain everything later. Can you just do it for me? Please, Chloe. Don't use any of our shared cards. Use yours. I'll pay you back tonight." Chloe, sensing the urgency and the steel in her friend's tone, didn't argue. "Okay. Lisbon it is. I'm sending the confirmation to your personal email now. Mia, be careful." "I will be," Amelia replied. "I also need the name of a shark, the best, most ruthless divorce attorney in New York." Chloe gave her a name, Brenda Walsh, a woman known for leaving financial titans quaking in their boots. Amelia's second call was to Ms. Walsh's office, scheduling an emergency consultation for the following afternoon, knowing she would be taking the call from another continent. Her plan was audacious, born of pain, and a desperate need to reclaim her own narrative. She would not give him the satisfaction of a tearful face-to-face confrontation. She would not allow him to deploy his well-honed weapons of charm, gaslighting, and false promises. He conducted his life via phone calls and remote commands, closing deals and ruining lives from a distance. She would end their marriage the same way. She would treat it like one of his hostile takeovers, swift, brutal, and from a position of unexpected power. She found out through a quick search that Jonathan wasn't just in a meeting in Boston. He was the keynote speaker at the New England Tech Investment Summit. His speech was scheduled for 8 p.m. That would be her moment. At 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time, Amelia was sitting in a sterile, anonymous chair at a gate in JFK's international terminal. The flight to Lisbon was boarding in an hour. Around her, people bustled with excitement, embarking on vacations and adventures. For Amelia, this was an exodus. She pulled out her phone, her heart hammering against her ribs. She took a deep, steadying breath, channeling every ounce of betrayal into a cold, clear focus. She dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice slightly breathless background noise echoing around him. "Angel." "Hey, I was just about to go on stage. Can I call you right back?" "No," Amelia said, her voice level and calm, a chilling counterpoint to the chaos in her chest. "You'll want to take this call." The tone of her voice must have alerted him. The background noise quieted as he presumably stepped away. "Mia, what is it? Is everything all right?" "The baby." "The baby is the only thing that's all right," she said. "I know, Jonathan." A beat of silence. "Know what, honey? You're not making any sense. I'm about to speak in front of 1,000 people." "I know about Sophia Dubois," she stated, letting the name hang in the air between them. "I know about St. Bart's, the yacht, the Cartier gift. I know about the late-night calls you said were with Asia and the business dinners at Le Jardin. I know everything." The silence on the other end was profound. She could picture him perfectly standing backstage, his handsome face paling the charming facade, crumbling to reveal the panicked man beneath. "Amelia, listen to me," he started, his voice dropping to a low, placating murmur. "It's not what you think. It's complicated. She's a colleague and things got blurred. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Let me come home. We can talk about this. I love you. I love our family." It was the exact script she had anticipated, and hearing it filled her not with pain, but with a pure, clarifying rage. "No, Jonathan. We will not talk about this. There is nothing left to say," she said, her voice as sharp as glass. "You don't love our family. You love the idea of it. You love the picture of perfection it provides. But you desecrated it. While I was at home carrying your son, you were building a separate life with her." "Mia, please don't do this over the phone," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "Don't throw away everything we have. Let me fix this." "There's nothing to fix," she said, the finality of her own words empowering her. "I'm at JFK. JFK. What are you doing there?" "Are you going somewhere?" "I've already gone," she replied. She looked at the departure board. "Flight 117 to Lisbon. Boarding. By the time you get back to New York, the penthouse will be empty. I've taken what I need. My lawyer, Brenda Walsh, will be in touch with yours tomorrow to begin divorce proceedings. I will be filing for full custody." "Custody lawyer Amelia, you can't be serious," he shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You can't just leave. You can't take my son." "He's my son, too," she countered, standing up and walking towards the boarding gate. "And I will not raise him in a home built on lies. You have a speech to give Jonathan. I suggest you pull yourself together. You wouldn't want to disappoint your investors." And with that, before he could utter another word, another lie, another empty promise, Amelia Redmond ended the call. She switched her phone to airplane mode, handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, and walked down the jet bridge without looking back. As she stepped onto the plane, she felt the weight of her old life fall away, leaving a terrifying but exhilarating void in its place. She was pregnant, alone, and flying toward an unknown future in a country she'd never been to. But for the first time in a long time, she was free. The flight across the Atlantic was a strange, surreal limbo. Cocooned in the anonymous darkness of the cabin, Amelia didn't sleep. She stared out the window at the endless black ocean, the enormity of her decision washing over her in waves. Fear, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of her resolve. She was thousands of miles from everything she knew, pregnant and alone with a dwindling bank account and a future that was a complete blank. There were moments of sheer panic where she wanted to demand the plane turn around. But then she would feel the gentle stir of her baby, a tiny, persistent anchor in the storm of her emotions. This wasn't just about her escape. It was about his sanctuary. She was forging a new world for him, one that would be built on truth and strength, not on the glittering facade of the Davenport Empire. She landed at Lisbon's Humberto Delgado Airport as the sun was beginning to cast a pale, rosy glow over the city. The air that greeted her as she stepped out of the terminal was different, softer than New York's, tinged with the faint, briny scent of the nearby Atlantic and the sweet smell of pastries from a nearby cafe. It smelled like a new beginning. Chloe had booked her a room in a modest but clean hotel in the Grassa district, one of Lisbon's oldest neighborhoods. After a taxi ride through winding cobblestone streets, past buildings adorned with beautiful intricate tiles, azulejos, she would later learn they were called, she checked in. The room was simple, with a small balcony that overlooked a tangle of terracotta rooftops and the distant, sparkling Tagus River. It was a world away from the sleek, impersonal luxury of her Fifth Avenue penthouse. It was real. The first week was the hardest. Loneliness was a physical ache. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, disoriented, reaching for a husband who was not only absent, but was the very reason for her exile. The pregnancy, once a source of shared joy, was now a solitary journey marked by mourning, sickness, and fatigue that she had to navigate alone in a foreign city. She subsisted on bread, cheese, and fruit from the local mercado, her limited Portuguese making every transaction a small, exhausting challenge. She spoke with her lawyer, Brenda Walsh, over a series of secure video calls. Brenda was exactly the shark Chloe had promised, a brisk, no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. "He's contesting everything, of course," Brenda said in her clipped New York accent, "claiming parental alienation, emotional distress. His legal team is trying to freeze your assets, arguing you absconded with joint funds." "The funds I took were from the account I had before we were married," Amelia stated calmly, having prepared for this. "Good. That helps." Brenda nodded. "Jonathan's primary strategy will be to paint you as an unstable, vindictive runaway. Our strategy will be to paint him as a calculating, adulterous narcissist who created an environment so toxic that his pregnant wife was forced to flee for her own well-being. The truth, in other words. But the truth needs evidence." Amelia spent hours methodically forwarding Brenda every piece of her digital investigation, the emails, the credit card statements, the phone logs, the link to Sophia Dubois's Instagram. She was building a case brick by painful brick. In between the legal battles and the waves of morning sickness, Amelia forced herself to explore. She walked. She walked until her feet ached through the winding alleys of Alfama, listening to the melancholy strains of fado music drifting from open doorways. She rode the iconic yellow tram 28, marveling at the vibrant street life. She sat for hours in sun-drenched prasas, sipping decaf coffee and sketching the architecture in a notebook she'd bought. The city's resilience resonated with her. Lisbon had been devastated by an earthquake in 1755, only to be rebuilt more beautiful and enduring than before. She saw a metaphor for her own life in its tiled facades and sturdy foundations. She too had been shaken to her core. She too would rebuild. It was her sketching that saved her. Drawing the buildings, the archways, the intricate ironwork of the balconies reawakened the architect within her. It was a part of herself. She had suppressed a passion she had set aside for Jonathan. Now it was her therapy. She wasn't just drawing buildings. She was reconnecting with the woman she had been before she became Mrs. Davenport. One afternoon, sitting in a cafe near the Bel-Em Tower, she overheard two men at the next table speaking English. They were lamenting the difficulty of finding local architects who understood the aesthetic of international clients looking to renovate historic properties. "They either want to gut everything and build a glass box, or they're so preservation-focused you can't even update the plumbing," one of them complained. A spark of an idea ignited within Amelia. She had the training. She understood both the sleek modernism of international taste and, as she was rapidly learning, the deep historic soul of Portuguese design. She saw a niche, a tiny crack in the market she might be able to fill. That evening, back in her small hotel room, she didn't cry. Instead, she opened a fresh page in her sketchbook. At the top, she wrote a single word, Alma, the Portuguese word for soul. She began to sketch not just buildings, but a future. It was a fragile blueprint, full of uncertainty. But for the first time since landing, it was a design that was entirely her own. The first few months of building a new life from scratch were a grueling testament to Amelia's newfound grit. Her escape fund was finite, and the initial legal fees were draining it faster than she liked. She moved from the hotel to a small rented apartment in the Campo de Urique neighborhood, a charming, family-oriented area with a famous indoor market. It was modest, but it was home. She dedicated her days to a strict regimen. Mornings were for Portuguese lessons online and communicating with Brenda Walsh. Afternoons were for her work. She created a professional portfolio, blending her old projects from New York with new speculative designs for Lisbon renovations she'd conceptualized in her sketchbook. She started a simple website, showcasing her unique vision, a fusion of modern functionality and deep respect for historical character. She named her fledgling one-woman consultancy Alma Designs. Her first client came from a chance encounter at a prenatal yoga class she'd joined to connect with other expectant mothers. A fellow expat, a British woman named Sarah, was complaining about the 19th century apartment she and her husband had bought. It was beautiful but impractical, a maze of dark, tiny rooms. Amelia, her confidence bolstered by weeks of preparation, shyly offered her portfolio. Sarah was impressed. Amelia's designs didn't seek to erase the apartment's history, but to illuminate it. She proposed removing a non-load-bearing wall to create an open-plan living space while restoring the original crown molding and azulejo tiles. She designed custom space-saving storage that was sleekly modern, yet unobtrusive. It was a revelation. The project was small, but Amelia poured her entire being into it. She managed the contractors, navigated the labyrinthine local permit offices, and oversaw every detail, her burgeoning belly a constant presence on the dusty construction site. The result was stunning. Sarah was thrilled and recommended Alma Designs to her network of fellow expats. Slowly, more work started trickling in. A small cafe renovation, a bachelor pad redesign, a family home extension. Her reputation grew by word of mouth. She was the architect who listened, who respected the soul of a space. Her big break came in her 8th month of pregnancy. A man named Javier Rossi, a legendary and semi-retired Portuguese property developer, had heard about her work. He was in his late 60s, with a warm smile and eyes that held the wisdom of a long and successful career. He invited her for coffee. "Your work is very interesting, Ms. Redmond," Javier said, looking through her portfolio. "You have a North American sense of space and light, but a European respect for history. It's a rare combination." He owned a derelict former tile factory in the Alcantara district, a sprawling industrial building with vast potential, situated right between the old city and the trendy riverfront. His dream was to convert it into a mixed-use, space luxury, loft apartments, artisan workshops, and a public gallery. Many had tried to pitch him, but he found their plans soulless. "Show me," he said with a wave of his hand. "Show me what Alma Designs would do with it." For 2 weeks, Amelia barely slept. Fueled by a creative fire she hadn't felt in years, she threw herself into the project. She worked from her small apartment, her drafting table littered with sketches, material samples, and baby name books. She envisioned a design that honored the building's industrial past, keeping the exposed brickwork and high ceilings, but infused it with warmth and light. She designed a central plant-filled atrium, sustainable energy systems, and living spaces that flowed. She presented her proposal to Javier, not as a set of blueprints, but as a story. The story of the building's soul being reborn. Javier listened intently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "Ms. Redmond," he said finally. A slow smile spreading across his face. "This is not a project for a freelance consultant. This requires a firm, a partner." He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a proposal for a new business venture, a partnership between the two of them, with him providing the capital and connections, and her providing the creative vision. He was offering to back the official launch of Alma Designs as a premier boutique architecture firm. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, tears not of sorrow, but of overwhelming, triumphant joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, absolutely." 2 weeks later, Amelia went into labor. She gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. As she held him in her arms in a Lisbon hospital room, the city lights twinkling outside her window, she looked at his perfect, tiny face and knew his name. Noah. It meant rest and comfort. But to her, it meant a new beginning, a promise kept. The divorce was finalized a month later. Thanks to Brenda Walsh's relentless work and the mountain of evidence, Amelia received a settlement that was far more generous than Jonathan had intended, plus substantial child support. He was granted supervised, pre-arranged video calls with Noah, but his legal attempts to force her return to the US had failed. The court recognized she had established a new life and a thriving business. The years that followed were a whirlwind of growth. Alma Designs became a resounding success. The Alcantara factory project, renamed The Kiln, won prestigious European Design Awards, putting Amelia on the map. She was no longer Amelia Redmond, the spurned wife. She was Amelia Redmond, the visionary CEO, a titan of industry in her own right. She moved with Noah into one of the stunning lofts she herself had designed, a space filled with light laughter and love. She was a boss, a mother, and the architect of her own destiny. 4 years flew by. Noah was a bright, happy boy, chattering away in a delightful mix of English and Portuguese. Alma Designs had grown into a 20-person firm, handling high-profile projects across Portugal and Spain. Amelia was a respected figure in the European design world, known for her sustainable, soulful approach to architecture. The pain of Jonathan's betrayal had faded from a raw wound to a distant scar, a reminder of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Her contact with Jonathan was minimal and sterile, mediated through lawyers and scheduled video calls. On screen, he was a ghost from her past. He always looked tired, the confident swagger replaced by a strained formality. Amelia kept the calls brief, focusing solely on Noah, never giving him an inch of personal information. She knew from snippets Chloe would pass on from financial news that his star had dimmed. The messy public divorce had tarnished his golden boy image. Several key partners had left his firm, and a few high-risk investments had gone sour. Sophia Dubois had reportedly departed for a competitor in Singapore a year after the scandal broke. The empire Jonathan had prized above all else was showing cracks. Amelia didn't gloat. She simply didn't care. Her world was here in Lisbon with her son, her company, and her friends. One sunny Thursday afternoon, Amelia was in her office at the Kiln, a beautiful light-filled space overlooking the firm's central atrium. Her assistant buzzed through on the intercom. "Amelia, there's a gentleman here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. He says his name is Jonathan Davenport." The name hit her like a physical shock. Her blood ran cold. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. He was here, in her building, in her city, thousands of miles from where he belonged. "Tell him I'm not available," she said, her voice tight. A moment's pause. "He says he won't leave," her assistant replied, sounding flustered. "He says it's about Noah." The mention of their son was a calculated blow, and she knew it. He was using the one thing that could breach her walls. Fury, hot and familiar, surged through her. "Fine," she said, her voice like ice. "Send him in." She stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to the door, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She needed to be standing to feel the ground beneath her feet. She heard the door open and close. Amelia. His voice. It was the same voice that had whispered lies and promises in her ear, but it was different now. It lacked the easy confidence, the undertone of absolute power. She turned around, slowly. He looked older than his years. There were fine lines around his eyes she didn't recognize, and a hint of grey at his temples. He was still handsome, still dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, but he seemed diminished like a photograph that had faded in the sun. He was holding a small, brightly wrapped gift. "What are you doing here, Jonathan?" she asked, her tone flat, devoid of any emotion. "I came to see my son," he said, taking a step forward. "And you. You see your son on a screen every second Sunday." "That was the arrangement," she countered, not moving an inch. "And you have no business seeing me. He's 4 years old, Amelia. He needs his father, not a face on a laptop," he said, his voice laced with a rehearsed sincerity. "I was wrong. What I did, it was the biggest mistake of my life. I lost everything that mattered." He looked around her office at the awards on the shelf, the stunning view of the city she had conquered. A flicker of something, was it disbelief, envy, crossed his face. "You've done well for yourself," he said, the words sounding hollow. "I have," she agreed simply. "No thanks to you." "That's not fair," he protested, taking another step. "I gave you a world most people can only dream of." Amelia let out a short, bitter laugh. "You gave me a gilded cage, Jonathan, and it turns out the bars were made of lies. I built this world," she said, gesturing around her, "with my own 2 hands while you were trying to tear me down with lawyers." He had the grace to look ashamed. "I was hurt. I was lashing out. I see that. Now, Sophia is gone. My business has suffered. I've had a lot of time to think about you, about us, about what we threw away." He held up the gift. "This is for Noah. I was hoping I could give it to him myself, maybe take him to the park, and then you and I could have dinner. Talk. For real this time." It was a classic Jonathan maneuver. The appeal to emotion, the feigned remorse, the strategic use of their child, all wrapped up in a package of charm he assumed was still irresistible. But he wasn't dealing with the same woman. He wasn't talking to the trusting, naive wife he had cheated on. He was talking to the CEO of Alma Designs. She looked him dead in the eye, her gaze unflinching. "Let me be perfectly clear," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You are not taking my son anywhere. You will not see him outside of your scheduled calls. And you and I will never, ever be having dinner." He was stunned into silence, clearly not expecting such a swift, absolute rejection. The charming smile faltered. "Amelia, be reasonable." "No, Jonathan, you be reasonable," she cut in her voice, rising with controlled power. "You flew 3,000 miles unannounced to ambush me at my place of work, using our son as bait, because your life fell apart, and you've decided you want your old one back. You think you can walk in here and erase the past. You think I'm just waiting to be reclaimed." She walked towards him, stopping just feet away. "That life is gone. The woman you were married to is gone. I buried her the day I boarded that flight. You don't get to come here and dig up her grave." His face hardened, the mask of contrition falling away to reveal the familiar, arrogant man beneath. "You owe me, Amelia. You took my son away from me." "I saved my son from you," she shot back. "From your lies, your selfishness, your utter lack of integrity. He has a wonderful life here. He is happy and he is loved. That is all that matters. She pointed to the door. You can leave the gift with my assistant if you like. She'll make sure he gets it. Now get out of my office, get out of my building, and get out of my city. For a long moment they stood locked in a standoff, the past and present colliding in the sunlit office. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and perhaps for the first time he saw not the woman he had lost, but the powerhouse she had become. He saw that he had no power here. Defeated, he placed the gift on her desk, turned without another word, and walked out of her life for the second time. As the door closed behind him, Amelia didn't feel relief or triumph. She felt nothing at all. He was just an echo from a past that no longer had the power to hurt her. After the heavy oak door clicked shut, sealing Jonathan's presence out of her world, Amelia didn't move. She remained at the window, her back to the room, her gaze fixed on the bustling courtyard below. The silence he left behind wasn't empty. It was full of her own strength, a quiet, humming power that filled the space he had tried to invade. There was no grief, no lingering what-if, not even the satisfying fire of victory. There was only the calm, steady assurance of a foundation that had been tested and had held. He was a ghost from a demolished building, and she now lived in a skyscraper of her own design. She checked the time. 3:45 p.m. She calmly gathered her handbag, smoothed down her dress, and walked out of her office, her expression serene. "Inez," she said to her assistant, who looked at her with wide, curious eyes. "I'm leaving a bit early today. Please handle any calls." She didn't glance at the brightly wrapped gift still sitting on her desk. It was an artifact from a museum she no longer visited. Her drive to Noah's Escola in the Lapa district was a study in contrasts. She navigated the charming, sun-drenched streets, her mind replaying not the confrontation with Jonathan, but the million tiny moments that constituted her real life here. The friendly nod from the man at the corner kiosk, the scent of blooming jacaranda trees, the specific shade of ochre on a favorite building. These were the details of her peace, the textures of her happiness. When she arrived, Noah came barreling out of the school's gate and into her arms, his small body, a warm, solid anchor of pure love. "Mama!" he cried, his chatter a waterfall of Portuguese and English as he described his day. A painting of a giant fish, a new song about a boat. As she buckled him into his car seat, his small hand reached out and patted her cheek. "You're smiling, Mommy." "I am, my love," she said, her heart swelling. "I have a lot to smile about." Instead of going straight home, she took him for a treat. They sat outside their favorite pastelaria, sharing a warm, flaky pastel de nata. She watched him get cinnamon all over his nose, and she laughed a genuine, unburdened laugh. This was her world. Not the empty opulence of New York society, but this small, perfect moment. This was what she had fought for. This was her victory. The conversation with Jonathan had simply been the sweeping up of the last fleck of dust from a long-finished renovation. Later that evening, after Noah was asleep, she finally called Chloe. She sat on her balcony, a glass of crisp Vinho Verde in her hand, the lights of the 25th de Abril bridge twinkling like a diamond necklace against the dark velvet of the night sky. "So the ghost of Christmas past paid a visit," Chloe said, her voice crackling with protective anger. "Do I need to fly to Lisbon and key his rental car?" Amelia laughed again, the sound lighter than it had been in years. "Save the airfare. It's not necessary. It was clarifying, Chloe. For years there was maybe a tiny subconscious part of me that wondered if he'd ever feel remorse, if he'd ever truly understand what he threw away. And today, I got my answer. He doesn't. He doesn't regret losing me. He regrets losing the perfect accessory, the stable home life that made his empire building easier. He regrets the consequences to his own life. Seeing him just confirmed that the man I loved never actually existed. "So you're really okay?" Chloe asked, her voice softening. "I'm better than okay," Amelia affirmed, taking a sip of wine. "I feel free, like the last chain just rusted away. He has no power here, Chloe. This is my city. He was just a tourist." In the year that followed, Amelia's life didn't just continue, it bloomed. Alma Designs landed its most ambitious project. Yet the transformation of a sprawling, neglected wine estate in the Douro Valley into a world-class, sustainable luxury hotel and retreat, the Quinta da Luz. The project was immensely complex, involving historical restoration, cutting-edge ecological technology, and navigating a web of local traditions. It consumed her, but in the best possible way. She thrived on the challenge, leading her growing team with a vision that was both bold and empathetic. Javier Rossi, seeing her masterful handling of the project, formally dissolved their initial partnership and restructured the firm, making her the majority owner and managing partner. He was, he said, ready to enjoy his retirement and watch her soar. Her personal life also found a new, gentle rhythm. She wasn't actively seeking romance, but she was no longer closed off to it. She cultivated a warm circle of friends, other parents from Noah's school, fellow artists and entrepreneurs from the kiln. There was a handsome landscape architect, Miguel, who worked with her on the Quinta da Luz project. Their conversations started with soil acidity and native plants, but soon drifted to art travel and single parenthood. It was easy, unforced. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was the slow, steady building of a new connection based on mutual respect and shared laughter. It was healthy. Exactly a year after Jonathan's visit, Chloe came to Lisbon. Amelia took her on a tour, a journey through her own history. They stood outside the first modest hotel in Graça. "This is where I landed," Amelia said quietly, pregnant, terrified, and with about enough money for a month. Then they went to the kiln, her bustling, award-winning headquarters. They walked through the light-filled atrium employees, greeting Amelia with warmth and respect. "And this is where I am now," she said, a proud smile on her face. That night, sitting on the balcony that had once been her solitary refuge, Chloe raised her glass. "To Amelia Redmond," she toasted. "She came, she saw, she built the damn thing herself." A few months later, Amelia was in a grand historic hall in Berlin, the air electric with anticipation. She was there to accept the prestigious European Woman in Architecture Award. When her name was called, the applause was deafening. As she walked to the stage, the spotlight warm on her face, she felt the weight of her journey. Every tear, every fear, every sleepless night, every small victory. She looked out at the sea of faces and began her speech. She spoke of how buildings have a soul, an alma. She talked about the beauty of restoration, of taking something broken or forgotten and revealing its true character, making it stronger and more luminous than before. "We often think of foundations as being made of concrete and steel," she said, her voice resonating with quiet confidence. "But the strongest foundations are intangible. They are integrity, resilience, and the courage to demolish a life that is not true, to build one that is. My greatest project has not been a hotel or a loft. It has been building a life of honesty for my son, and rediscovering the woman I was meant to be. She paused, then concluded, "This award is for my team, for my mentors, and for my son Noah, who is my true north. And it's for the beautiful, resilient city of Lisbon, which taught me that even after the most devastating earthquake, you can rebuild and you can reach for the sky once more." The standing ovation was long and heartfelt. Back in her Lisbon loft, the heavy, elegant award sitting on the mantelpiece, she found Noah on the floor, not with blocks, but with a miniature architectural model of the Quinta da Luz project. He was carefully placing tiny model trees around the main building. He looked up at her, his eyes shining with pride. "You build big, beautiful houses, Mummy." "We do, my love," she said, kneeling down beside him and pulling him into a hug, inhaling the sweet, familiar scent of her son, her home, her entire world. She held him tight, her chin resting on his head as she looked out the window at the familiar skyline. The frightened woman who had landed at JFK with nothing but a secret and a prayer was gone forever. The heartbroken wife who had cried over a stranger's email was a phantom. In their place stood this woman here now. A mother, a visionary, the CEO of a company built on soul. She was not just the queen of a kingdom she had inherited. She was the architect, engineer, and master builder of her own life, and from this vantage point, the view was magnificent. And that is Amelia's incredible journey. From the hollow glamour of a Fifth Avenue penthouse to the authentic sun-drenched streets of Lisbon, her story is a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit. She transformed the deepest betrayal into the foundation for a new life, proving that our greatest heartbreaks can often become the catalyst for our most profound triumphs. She didn't just escape her past, she redesigned her future. What did you think of her final confrontation with Jonathan? Was she right to completely shut him out of her and Noah's life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If Amelia's story of resilience and empowerment inspired you, please smash that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to become the architect of your own destiny. And for more real-life stories of drama, revenge, and ultimate victory, make sure you hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for listening.